This is Generation Health. Every week we bring you news, cutting-edge research, and time-tested best practices to help you live a long, healthy life. With the tools and information available today, this generation has the potential to be the healthiest in human history. Following in the footsteps of our founder, Joe DiMatteo, we are the second generation of a family dedicated to helping you live better, longer. To my right is Dante DiMatteo, registered pharmacist, certified strength and conditioning specialist. Hello, sir.
Tyler.
That's it. And across from me is Joey DiMatteo, registered pharmacist and board-certified clinical nutritionist. How are you, my friend?
Very good, Tyler. How are you today?
I'm good. One of these days we need to remember to bring different shirts so that we can actually pretend like this is a separate day.
Hopefully I didn't wear this like 2 weeks ago
Shirtless.
or something either.
Sure, we could not do that. Give me a few more months of exercise. I am your host, Tyler Andrews. And on today's show, man, we've got a ton of varied topics. Sometimes we do these and they're all real heavy into one thing. This one is all over the place, scattershot. If you like the variety show, stick around because this is it. We're going to talk about eating sugar. We're going to talk about mad cow blood donors. Oh. That sounds weirder than it is. We've got another fantastic new tool in the fight against diabetes. We've got a question from a listener. And I really want to share with you guys something that I found in Genesis, specifically dealing with Judah. But we'll get to that later. First things first, the most important thing. I know you guys are waiting with bated breath. The unrelated...
Beta cells.
Beta cells? What? First things first, unrelated question of the day. What would you love to find at a yard sale?
I don't have anything specific, I don't think. I think
Something gives me the feeling that you're like, I don't buy used stuff.
No, it's not that.
I don't need other people's things.
No, it's not even that. Here's, I guess, what I would say. I do get nostalgic for a lot of the toys that I had as a kid that were purged for whatever reason. So, like, if I were to go to a yard sale and see some of that stuff that I used to have. Like I loved figures. I had basketball, football figures, wrestling figures, tons of those, wrestling rings.
Yeah.
Tons of board games, but mainly the figures. Like if I were to see some of those, I would buy those at a yard sale.
Would you really?
Yeah. So there's not like one specific guy that I would want, but yeah.
Okay.
So that's fairly specific.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
You know those are out there. You should probably go do that.
I know. But all the ones I liked are somehow expensive. The ones I had, which makes it even more sad.
I know what I'm getting you for Christmas. Dante, what would you get? What do you want to find?
That's tough. I hate to do this, but it would probably be like the same kind of thing. Wrestling figures or old video games. Yeah. Even if I don't play them, like old DVDs of maybe an old movie or something that we had. I mean, we just went to a comic book kind of store. Yeah. And I know that's not what a yard sale is.
No, it's not. But
but they sell that kind of stuff.
They sell nostalgia. Yes.
Yeah. Anything that had Shawn Michaels, the old wrestler on it, we got it. So
fair enough.
I'd just be looking for Shawn Michaels stuff at yard sales.
Man,
that is more specific. I like that.
I would go straight for the old comics or old Magic the Gathering cards. If anybody has those and doesn't want them anymore, just send them my way.
Magic the Gathering.
Yeah. Yeah, you remember that?
What's that like?
It's a card game. It came out in 1992, late 92.
So like Dungeons and Dragons?
It is. It's Dungeons and Dragons, the card game, basically. It's we're wizards trying to kill each other.
I thought it was like a Ouija board.
No, well... Some folks in the evangelical world felt like it was on par. But
really?
No, it's not. It's,
yeah. I get you.
It's like D&D in that it's a game. It's a game. You're playing a game. You're not summoning demons.
Yeah.
Even if the card says summon demon. Anyway, that's a bad choice. I would also be really excited about finding like first editions of different books that I would really like to
They get pricey though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to find a more obscure book that you just happen to find, that's not some big wildly popular book.
Right. I found, I did find patches, like Boy Scout patches.
Yeah.
Somebody had a whole big bag of patches that I guess their kids had acquired or whatever. I bought that. I may have sold most of those on eBay for a substantial profit because I knew that there was a big secondary market.
Shout out Gary V.
Yeah. If I'm being honest, yes. Okay. That is so ridiculous. Let's talk.
That was fun.
That was?
Yeah, that was
we
fun.
can do this again. We can have a spin-off show where we go yard sailing.
Go to the yard sales.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just going to have to get permission to do it beforehand. Okay, so on to serious and important things. While reading through different studies and perusing different news sites, I came across a couple of articles, or I came across one article referencing two different studies I'd never seen that linked cancer and sugar, or specifically sugar intake to cancer, and started talking about artificial sweeteners as well. But since I'm not a doctor, I wanted to see what you guys had to say about this. The first study was from November of 2020, so just a couple years old. It was in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition. It involved 101,000 adult participants over a 6-year time span, and it found that total sugar intake was linked to a higher overall cancer risk. The pull quote out of here says, significant association with cancer risks were also observed for added sugars, free sugars, sucrose, sugars from milk-based desserts, those are my favorites, dairy products, and sugary drinks. These results suggest that sugars may represent a modifiable risk factor for cancer prevention, breast cancer in particular. The second study was from Cancer Epidemiology, Biomarkers, and Prevention, which is a magazine I get all the time. I don't know about you guys. The quick version of this study was published in October 2022, and it looked specifically at sweetened beverages, both regular and diet beverages. It followed over 900,000 participants for 34 years, starting in 1982, and it was watching specifically for 20 different types of cancer and cancer-related deaths. So this is where you guys have to jump in. If I read it correctly, drinking 2 or more sugary beverages a day was associated with a higher mortality from colorectal and kidney cancer. Mm-hmm. They wanted to see if these drinks elevated risk for obesity-related cancers over and above just being obese. So in other words, being obese has a higher cancer risk for these different types of cancers. Does drinking these beverages elevate it even beyond that, right? It seemed like most of them didn't, that the obesity was the biggest agitating factor. Artificial sweeteners, though, weren't much better, with an increased risk of pancreatic cancer that persisted after BMI adjustment. So again, this is me, the layman, trying to understand this. So they looked at how many people in the group got cancer, and then they said, are these rates higher than the rate of obesity in the group, correct? Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me what I'm seeing here other than just or sugar is really, really bad for you and it feeds cancer.
Yeah. I mean, it seems it's another one of those studies that seemingly leads us down the path that we kind of already understand. You know, it's just a matter of trying to parse out more of, mechanistically what's happening. It's like, is there something in particular about sugar sweetened beverages that portends to more cancer? And so this shows that maybe that's the case, especially with, the ones that were highlighted, such as pancreatic cancer. But again, in both of the studies that we're going to be talking about, or just kind of like this body of evidence that we're talking about, these are all studies that can't show causation. And we'll often refer to this at the, as we start to dig through a given study.
Yeah.
These can only show us the association.
A correlation.
And again, it's nothing groundbreaking. The majority of people probably understand that. But again, it's not that sugar sweetened beverages cause cancer. Aspartame causes cancer. It's not, we can't quite go that far.
Right.
But at the same time, in nutrition studies like this, it's just, you're hard pressed to ever think a randomized controlled trial, the gold standard, would ever be done due to ethical reasons, just because of the fact that you can't, you can't just give these people all of one thing and not the other, and not potentially lead them down a trivial path there.
Right. Because if you discover that aspartame actually does cause cancer and you force fed it to people for 20 years, then congratulations, you just gave everybody in that group cancer.
Yeah.
So there's no way to actually do that study in an ethical manner.
Yeah. And also, in another kind of bird's eye view with all this stuff is in these studies, they're trying to control for a multitude of different things.
Right.
But the point is, the effort in doing so is valiant, and the statistical ways to do that are valid and it's important, but it's hard. And the authors will admit that there's no way that you can perfectly control for every single confounding variable.
Right.
And all that's to say that we just take all of these sorts of findings with a grain of salt, and we, maybe it helps us strengthen our position on certain things. Maybe it helps us kind of go back to the drawing board on certain things. But kind of in a nutshell, I don't think that these studies are going to make us make any groundbreaking recommendations.
Okay.
And so I think we can break it down.
That the artificially sweetened beverage cancer risk with pancreatic cancer, especially because they used the word robust after a BMI adjustment, was pretty interesting. Because, and again, this is for now without really diving deeper into it. It does go back to are these artificial sweeteners? They're not just tricking the tongue. Like, to what extent are they tricking the brain, and are they tricking the pancreas, and potentially causing some odd pancreatic and unusual pancreatic activity? I don't know that that's just a coincidence that was the one type of cancer that it was clearly associated with. I found that very interesting, because there's still always that hanging out there that what is there a trick within our body going on beyond just sweetness of the tongue? Because the other things that I have read linked to that if you the weight gain, if you eat an artificial sweetened, whether it was a beverage or whatever, you're just putting it on in your coffee,
right,
and that's all you have, that there's not really weight gain associated with that. But whenever you eat food with it, especially carb heavy food, that then you get a larger weight gain or larger blood sugar spike. If it just thinks it's sweet, but there's still nothing there to actually spike the blood sugar, that the pancreas functioned okay. But when it was super sweet and there was carbs there, that it did kind of almost follow the sweetening power of the artificial sweetener, because there was other food on board, and spiked blood sugar. So I kind of tied, because that's what was, I just started looking things up after I read that.
Yeah.
Because I just figured, it can't be, maybe it's a coincidence, but I just didn't think that it could be. But.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying that drinking a Diet Coke on its own, fine, whatever. But if you drink a Diet Coke and you have the burger, then you might as well have had a regular Coke, because it's going to have the same effect glycemically.
I wouldn't go that far.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think what Joey's saying is there is definitely more. There's more to it. And again, like they say at the end of all these studies, X finding warrants the
further research.
Yes.
Yeah, but I would definitely say that I was not saying that it would be worse than sugar is still sugar, always going to be worse. It was just a matter of comparing the effect of just the Diet Coke versus let's say a Diet Coke and a burger versus just the burger.
Right.
You would get more of a blood sugar spike from the burger and Diet Coke than you would from the burger alone. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Compare that. You can't.
Yes.
We can't throw the Coke in there because still too much sugar in that thing.
It's tough too. I mean, blood sugar excursions, like it happens. You know what I mean? And it's just the to the extent at which those happens, at which those happen is important too. So even though maybe that study had the changes reflected in blood sugar excursion or spikes, at the end of the day or at the end of a month to your A1C or whatever, it's like how much mechanistically all of that sounds like makes a ton
or if
of
you're doing
sense.
it once in a while.
It's just
okay.
It's tough. It's all of those things. That's why it's like you kind of have to keep digging. You know what I mean? That's why. So it's who's to say a lot of those the smaller things, they don't necessarily add up to a higher A1C, let's say, especially in the whole picture of how often do you have a sugar sweetened beverage versus artificially sweetened beverage? What's your whole dietary pattern look like? It's just so hard.
Those we're talking about people doing at least 2 or more a day, which is that's not a small amount.
Definitely. This goes without saying, but it's just, I mean, eventually it's not just about comparing the sugar sweetened beverage to the artificially sweetened. I mean, we have to make sure that we're not treating these ASBs like water, that it's like water versus sugar. These are still
It's not,
but then let's not go overboard and let's and act like they're as bad as sugar either, and jump down that rabbit hole that they're. So I just think because there's a tendency to want to be reductionist in these, and
always
let's dive down that it's like water for you, and let's dive down that it's worse than sugar for you, and truth is in the middle, and that's where
Thank you for that. I mean, because honestly, the biggest thing is like, if it's everyone, we all agree that we could throw all this out if we could just all drink water all the time. Yeah, it's simply not realistic.
Solves the problem.
Yeah,
fair enough. Okay, really exciting news for the blood donation community. Mad cow disease and blood donors. Mad cow disease, that would be Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. This is from AP News. Blood collectors nationwide are tracking down U.S. citizens who lived, worked, or vacationed in the UK, France, Ireland, or served at military bases in Europe during various periods between 1980 and 2001, as well as anyone who received blood transfusions in those three countries any time since 1980. Since 1999, those people have been banned from giving blood in the U.S. for fear that they had been exposed to mad cow disease. But after decades of research and reassessment, the FDA has determined that the risk of the disease has abated. And this is from the official Red Cross press release. Quote, in alignment with recent changes to FDA eligibility guidance, the Red Cross has updated its donor eligibility. Those who lived in or were stationed in the UK, Ireland, or France, or who have never tried to give blood may now be eligible to give blood with the Red Cross. This is exciting. I give blood all the time, so this one really sticks out to me. What is Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease? What is mad cow? And why was it a big deal?
Yeah, so it's an infectious brain neurological disease. There's different causes, different subtypes, but we'll focus on the variant that's specific here, and that's the one that's ultimately spread from cattle. So the cattle contains what's called bovine spongiform encephalopathy. Oh. So basically like we said, firstly, it's a brain disease where essentially the brain does take on almost like a sponge-like form because of the neurological attack, if you will, that takes place. So it's caused by, there's these misfolded proteins, or they're called prions. We all normally have prions that they go by PRP, let's call it. That's the normal one. There's PRP-SCs that are present in the brain. Those are the bad ones. And those are the ones that can convert all the good ones into bad ones.
Oh, wow.
And so once that happens, there's essentially just irreversible damage that can happen to the gray matter of the brain. And so again, it goes back to that spongy, holy look that occurs.
How are people getting it? What was the relevance of living in England?
Yeah, it's obviously super rare.
Yeah.
But I guess in the UK there was an outbreak of like 200 and some people. And so because this disease is imminently fatal, it has a long incubation period, but once you start to show symptoms, you almost you die pretty quickly.
They were like using bone meal, basically, not to be crude, but parts of the animal that they weren't eating were getting basically recycled and then refed back to the cows. So it was like circulating their own disease.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was mixed in with fertilizers and antibiotics and all this stuff. It was like this big, self-sustaining cocktail for the cows. And that's what they were doing in Britain. And that's why it spread so quickly there.
That seems like that was a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there was, and then in addition to eating that, they thought that, well, obviously if you're getting a blood transfusion, then the same infection can be spread that way. And I think there were 5 cases that VCJD was shown in individuals who had transfusions. So after that point,
so it was possible to spread it via a blood transfusion.
Yeah. But in a quick way, the process that they use, I guess, to purify blood after donation is much more thorough and eliminates almost all likelihood of that happening. So
plus it's been long enough now since an outbreak that the likelihood
That's what I looked at. It was 10 years saying from exposure. So once you pass that 10 years, you're being overly cautious. And the point we are now with blood donations, didn't maybe seem wise to be so overly cautious about that when there's such a need. Yeah.
There is always a very high need at the Red Cross. I know every time I get hit up constantly. I literally just deleted an email a few minutes ago from the Red Cross because even though I go every month, you should give platelets and blood. It's really, really important. You should do it. There is always a shortage. There's always a need. They're always trying to incentivize people to show up. So the fact that there's that they're able to broaden the pool at all, that's really, really exciting.
Yeah.
I know I saw also in that same story that they were looking for more African Americans as well. Why African Americans?
Yes. Sickle cell is a incredibly common blood disease that seemingly affects more of the African American population. And,
interesting.
And in order to instead of, before we go down the rabbit hole of what sickle cell is exactly, once you're affected by it, you're almost imminently in need of a blood transfusion.
And so you need like 1,000 over your lifetime.
Yeah. Wow, really? I didn't realize that.
Black people, I believe, there's like a 1 in 3 chance if you're black that you'll be a match.
Okay.
Versus if you're white, the chances are so much lower. So when they've that high demand, when a sickle cell person has that kind of demand need, and you've got a 1 out of 3 chance that another black person will be a match, it becomes very critical.
Okay, so it's that they need specific types of blood if they are sickle cell positive.
Yes,
and Black Americans being the primary. Carriers isn't the word, but they have that type of blood that matches that in a far greater quantity than anybody else does. Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, well, there you go. If you lived in England or you are sucking wind, you should probably go see if you can donate to the Red Cross. It's really important, and they have snacks. So that's always a plus. We got a question in from Pat in Boston. She emailed us at questions@askjoedimatteo.com, where you can email questions too. She said, I have listened to your program for many years and use your products. I miss your dad. I assume she's talking about your dad's program because this program hasn't existed for many years. I'd like to come off cholesterol medication. What can I use in its place? Thank you, from Pat.
Yeah, I mean, we get a lot of questions like that. That's sounds very specific, but it's very broad.
Yeah.
And what I mean by broad is if you have history of heart attacks and in your family, maybe you've had one, you're on 40, 80 milligrams of Lipitor, well, then the plan for you to come off of your cholesterol drugs is for all intents and purposes not to. Okay. And that would just be, that's kind of one extreme.
Yeah.
But it's out there and it's not uncommon. And then the other extreme is, maybe you're in your 30s or 40s or maybe even a little older, but you eat a great diet. You feel like you're very healthy. Your number just crept up above what your doctor maybe felt was comfortable. And he put you on a low dose, put you on 5-10 milligrams of simvastatin, and you feel like you're this close. So maybe if you were doing some other things, maybe picked up the diet a little more, started eating a little better, exercise a little more, and you added a supplement that at that point, with being open and honest with your practitioner, that at that point you could come off. So it just depends, Pat, where you are in that scale. If you're on that first scale I mentioned, you just kind of got to do what you got to do. Improve your diet and exercise more, no matter what. That's only going to help your health as time goes, and potentially you could maybe see some dose decreases if you do those things. I was
going to say, is that a possibility? Even if you can't get off completely, can you reduce your dose potentially?
Yeah, unless you're hitting tons of markers like bypass surgery, unless you're hitting really like certain levels of markers, they're just going to want you on like an 80 milligram dose or something, 40 milligram dose. Unless you're hitting some of those really high markers, yes, they're going to still be basing, for the most part, they're not going to want you to go too low, and we don't want to see that either. We don't want to see it driven too low. So that's always out there. Step one, if you feel like you're in that mid to high range and you can't come off right away or anything like that, that maybe first goal is, again, because it's going to be so good for your health overall anyway, to maybe have dose decrease be a goal. So if you're in that lower range, you just started, you're on the low pill, you don't have a whole lot of history, then yeah, we could look at something like red yeast rice.
Yep.
2 of those twice a day. You could also look at something like bergamot. You can take them together, or you can start with one or the other. So those are 2 great options, 2 great supplements that we would recommend that we've been using for years. That again, if you fall within the proper parameters, and you're upfront with your doctor about how you're going to go about doing it, even better if you want to work with us, where we have a nurse practitioner that can at least work with you, and at least whenever you talk to your doctor, help you make a little bit better of a decision and help you maybe to convey what you're doing better. I think that's an ideal way to do it if it's something you really want to do.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
There's definitely some parts that we need to add there. When initiated on cholesterol medication or statins, it's not just based on the number.
Yeah.
Your cholesterol value, that's certainly a massive component of it. It's initiated based upon your ASCVD risk. So at some point your doctor may have discussed it stands for atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. So if your risk is greater than 10%, they're going to recommend some sort of cholesterol lowering agent. And beyond just the cholesterol lowering benefit of the drug, there are some other purported benefits as far as reducing the risk for a cardiac event. So it's tough.
Yeah.
It's tough. I would be curious to know what her risk is.
Right. There's any details in there.
Yeah.
So we don't know age, we don't know weight, we don't know lifestyle.
Yeah. And so it is tough. I mean, they're seeing more and more, the lower you get the HDL, the better it is. And so you kind of understand why they're quick to initiate. And the other layer to this is, something I think we should talk about soon is, there were updates in the European guidelines with how a lot of this works.
Okay.
And there are some new blood markers that they're testing for.
Oh.
And so I don't want to speak out of turn as far as what those exactly are. But again, if you are somebody, in this case, theoretically, maybe Pat's on the fence, maybe her risk is around 10, maybe it's a little lower. Her doctor just wants to be safe. Maybe she wants to try red yeast rice, whatever. There are some other labs that can be done to further, classify what is the specific particle. What's the particle sizes? What kind of cholesterol particles are we dealing with?
Right.
There are certain particles that portend these sort of long-term event risk issues.
Yeah, because not all cholesterol is the same.
Right. And beyond just the HDL, LDL thing. I mean, it's all within sort of the LDL umbrella that there's something specific about those particles that these guidelines talk about, and I think that we'll talk about at some point.
Yeah.
That if this is something she wants to explore a little further, we can talk to her. We can have her ask her prescriber about some additional testing.
Okay. So bottom line is she needs to make sure she's communicating with her doctor openly and honestly. She needs to make sure that she's doing the lifestyle things, eating a proper diet and exercising. I know weight training is big, right? For lowering cholesterol. Resistance training, I guess that's the technical term. And we need to, she can look into red yeast rice and bergamot to kind of help bring those numbers down altogether. But the bottom line is, if your risk is too high, you may just need to stay on them forever. And that's okay, because that's better than dying. And definitely talk to your doctor. And if you want, we can work with them, talk to Joyce and get some specifics figured out there. Very cool. All right. We got another question. Excuse me, not another question. We have another story. This one is about diabetes, specifically a new diabetes drug. This seemed like people were really excited about this. I know very little about this, but we're gonna see if I can say these big names. This is from ABC News. For the first time, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration on Thursday approved a treatment that can delay the onset of type 1 diabetes. Teplizumab, a monoclonal antibody that will be marketed under the brand name of Tzield, was shown in clinical trials to delay onset of insulin dependence, type 1 diabetes, for patients with autoantibody markers of early risk by over 2 years, with hopes for some that it could delay the onset even longer. Tzield was approved to delay the onset of stage 3 type 1 diabetes in adults and children ages 8 and up who currently have stage 2 type 1 diabetes. The medication is thought to slow down the body's attack on its own insulin-producing cells and thus give people more time before they become dependent on pharmaceutical insulin. Tzield is not suitable for people with insulin-dependent type 1 diabetes. So I assume that's people already in stage 3. People who are pre-type 2 diabetics or those with type 2 diabetes. So this has no impact at all on type 2 diabetes. This is specifically for type 1. Okay. All right. Help me understand this. What is a monoclonal antibody? I know I've heard that term in the news. I don't know anything about it.
In layman's terms, basically, it's a drug class that's used in treating a multitude of conditions. They're produced in a very complicated way. So essentially, it's produced with a cell line that's made via cloning, which is from essentially a unique white blood cell.
Okay.
And it has monovalent affinity, meaning it will only bind to one specific part of an antigen or the bad guy. So you create this monoclonal antibody, which has the ability to go out and exert these either anti-inflammatory effects or anti-cancer effects. Whatever the antigen brings to the table is essentially sent out to neutralize that, for the lack of a better term.
So it's an antibody. It's a white blood cell that, in effect, like your body would produce it theoretically on its own to fight a thing, but isn't for whatever reason or can't or what have you. Yeah. It's produced in a lab and then used targeted specifically to boost your own immunity, in effect.
Yep. So essentially, it's like they'll look at what the antigen is.
Yeah.
Or they'll look at what the white blood cell is, whatever can, either way, like whatever can help attack the antigen or whatever the theoretical white blood cell looks like. They'll make something similar to that, and whichever one has the most affinity for that given antigen is ultimately how they come up with the treatment. And so they can use like human DNA, they can use animal DNA, they can manipulate viruses,
mice a lot.
They can use all those sorts of things to come up with these sorts of molecules.
Okay, so this is one of those.
It is.
And it functions by what did it say here? Medication is thought to slow down the body's attack on its own insulin-producing cells.
Yeah.
Thus giving people more time before they become dependent upon pharmaceutical insulin.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they found what antibody is or antigen is attacking the pancreas essentially, and is causing type 1 diabetes, and they build this monoclonal antibody to stop it. The only issue is that it doesn't work for all that long.
Yeah.
That's really the only concern. It's an amazing accomplishment, and I could certainly see that this is a first step into the company themselves and just this line of thinking doing amazing things. But yeah, it is tough. And again, it's easy for me to say I'm not, stage 1 or stage 2, type 1 diabetic,
Right.
So just real quickly, the stages, so they don't really talk about stage 1 here, but stage 1, you've got some autoimmunity present, but you don't really have any symptoms and you don't have any blood sugar control issues. So stage 2 is where you start having some blood sugar issues.
That's when it typically gets spotted.
Yes. But so what they're trying to do is or what they believe they can do, and what they have shown they can do, is arrest it between 2 and 3. Because when you're going into 3, you've got full-blown antibody, obviously, you've got blood sugar dysregulation, and now you've got insulin dysfunction, and you need insulin. So that occurs. So basically, it's stage 2. This is the note I wrote, about writing what it was. The risk, if without the drug, of you going to stage 3 is 75%. Okay. And in a lifetime, it's 100%.
So it's going to happen eventually.
It approaches 100% untreated. But it's 75%, I believe, within like 51 months. Then if you do the medication, here's what they found in the study. So 45% of the 44 who were on the drug, 45% of the 44 were at stage 3 at 51 months. So 45% of the 40, significant number, at 51 months were there. It's usually 75%, historically.
Right.
72% of in the study, so the study matched up almost exactly. 72% of the 32 placebo members of the study were at stage 3 at the 51-month follow-up. Okay, so we fall on that. So 45% versus 72% at the 51-month follow-up. So, it's significant.
Was it 26, 27%, something like that?
Yeah.
27% reduction in...
It depends which way you flip it. Yeah, so, that is, that's definitely significant. But when I believe, what would they say this was $194,000?
Yeah, this is from CNN, the monoclonal antibody to teplizumab, Tzield, is given through intravenous infusion. The therapy will carry a wholesale cost of roughly $194,000 for a full course of treatment. And the drug's manufacturer said in an investor call on Friday, although this is not expected to be the price that consumers would pay. Wholesale cost of almost $200,000.
Yeah. Which makes me realize that pharmacies will never see it. It'll be a kind of a medical benefit sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's going to be happening at hospitals and things like that. Which, I guess if it's an intravenous infusion, that's probably the way that would be done normally anyway, right?
Yeah, and I do wonder, how insurances will be convinced to pay for this, given the amount of time. I know how serious it is, but if you're, 32 and you're delaying it by a year or two, I just don't know. To living,
because that's what they
hopefully
said.
Your 60s or 70s, that a $200,000 investment in you to push that back for a period of time is something that the Blue Crosses of the world are going to do.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This becomes something for the wealthy. I don't know. And then what are they going to find the benefit in that? So again, I do want to look more into it. There's not a whole lot out there. It's brand new.
Brand new.
There may be some more. There may be some more benefits that we have not seen or that have not been released yet. That's quite possible. But as of now, I look at it more, me personally, that it's an amazing thing in terms of what it's capable of doing, what its future represents. But I can't quite feel like it's amazing in what its actual result is.
Yeah. Because these people eventually are going to still develop. Basically 100% of the people will eventually have type 1 diabetes.
This was a follow-up at 51 months in the study. 45% of them got it.
Yeah.
But versus a normal 75.
So for those it works, you're looking at more time without having to do injections or deal with some of the other ramifications of type 1 diabetes. But it's still a limited time benefit.
Yeah. And again, you could be watching this video and said, how horrible life is with diabetes. And if I could have bought 18 or 24 months, how could you possibly say that that's not valuable?
Yeah.
And more, I'm looking, I'm trying to balance the personal and the practical as much as I can. That's all I'm doing whenever I'm saying the pricing of this. I think if this was 10 grand even, divided by 12 months, I'd be saying it's a miracle. And I would do it too. And all those things, and insurances will pay for it. But you're talking about, medication that's usually reserved for like life-saving cancer type treatments. And it's,
and you're not talking about whether somebody should or shouldn't do it. You're talking about, will insurance pay for this?
Exactly.
Because that's a
nuts and bolts.
That's a business decision, as weird and cold as it may be to say. That's why that number is relevant.
Yes.
But on the plus side, I guess, if they can do it and they can make that money, maybe they will continue research and come up with a cheaper, better version that works for longer.
Because you would have to hope that either the next version of what they make or this is very much a copycat industry where you're going to have all these drugs end in MAB, these monoclonal antibodies. You're going to have some other MAB drug made by some other biotech company, and they're going to delay it. They're going to, they're going to double these numbers. They're going to guarantee delay for 5 years. So now you're talking, whoa, you know what I mean? Life-changing stuff. And that's what I believe we're going to see. I just don't know when.
Yeah. So this is cutting-edge research. It's exciting from that perspective, but temper the excitement because It's really expensive.
Yeah, let's keep our eyes open for more information on this possibly, and also for where this exact class goes from here.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we have been working for ages on all of this stuff. And one of the things that has been pointed out to us that's missing from what we've been doing is that Joe, your dad, used to preach on his show. I am not a preacher, but I can share with you guys something cool I saw in Genesis. So when I was a kid, I don't know about you guys, when I was a kid, the versions of the Bible stories that I got were, somewhat sanitized. We skipped certain parts of the stories. There were certain details that were left out because they were not for kids anymore, right? So King David killed Goliath, and then he was the king, and there was that dancing naked thing, and that was funny. And then maybe we heard about, Bathsheba and Uriah, but probably not. Maybe not until you're a teenager. That was the full extent of the story of David. There's not whole bunches of details that were left out. So I have been discovering, as I have been rereading and rereading, all kinds of new details about these people that I think is just fascinating. And I understand why they weren't taught to me as a child, but I'm seeing all kinds of cool stuff. And I just saw this. This was super fascinating to me for Uriah. So real quick, I'm in Genesis. We'll take this quickly. We've got Abraham. Abraham has Isaac. Isaac has Jacob. Jacob has 12 sons. Those are the 12 tribes of Israel. Eventually, right? They're not yet. Right now, they're just 12 sons. And if you read in the story, there are so many stories in there that I didn't know. Little details, little details, like, genocide of a village. Simeon and Levi, who would eventually become the tribe of Levi, the priests, right? They get angry, rightfully so, about their sister being raped. And so they go and kill an entire village. Probably not the right way to handle that situation, but they did it. And it says in chapter 34 that the brothers joined in pillaging and enslaving everybody that survived, which that's fun. That's the patriarch. That's exciting. We hear about Judah again in chapter 37. That's the whole story of Joseph and the coat, and Joseph gets thrown down the well, and the brothers are just going to kill him. Reuben takes off to try and go tell dad or something. But Judah has the brilliant idea. He says, this is in verse 26, then Judah said to his brothers, what do we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, not lay a hand on him, for he is our brother and our own flesh. And they agreed. So Judah has this brilliant idea. Hey, why don't we sell him? Because then we'll at least make a profit instead of just ridding ourselves. We can profit off of this too. So he's a really cool cat at this point. The story continues on, and we hear all about Joseph, and he saves everybody, and that's great. And we hear about Judah again later on in the story when he steps up, and he is very much a man of character. But what's really fun is right after Joseph gets sold, that's in chapter 37, that's the main storyline, is Joseph, right? We follow that one. But there's a pause, and chapter 38 is the story of Judah and Tamar. I won't go into details about the story of Judah and Tamar. You should read it for yourself, Genesis 38. But the short version is, Judah does not cover himself in glory. He behaves in a very unworthy manner, which to that point was pretty normal for Judah. He wasn't a great dude. But what's crazy is that he finally hits that point where he goes, you know what? I was wrong. Specifically, let's see, he stops running. He stops denying what has been done. And he says, she is more right than me, because he had messed up with her in a significant fashion. And what's crazy is that from that point on is when he starts to become the man that would eventually be the tribe of Judah. And the reason that's really, really relevant is the tribe of Judah is where Jesus came from. But nothing changes until he accepts responsibility and says, I screwed up. I was wrong. And I had read all of that, and then I happened to read in Proverbs 28 that same day, Proverbs 28:13, it says, no one who conceals his sin will prosper, but whoever confesses and renounces them will find mercy. I just thought it was super cool. From that point on, when he messes up with Judah and Tamar, that's when God blesses him with 2 new sons. He loses his first 2 sons and the whole thing. We won't go into the details. And then with with Joseph later on, he's the one that steps up and stands in the gap between his father and his brother, though he doesn't know it's his brother, and all of that. He is the one who stands up and is a man of character and says, I'll take the hit. I'll be the one responsible. Very, very cool. And that from that correction, that change in path from I was wrong and now I'm going to do what's right, that's where God begins to use him in a significant way. I don't think we would know the name of Judah if he had continued down the path he was on.
Yeah.
Anyway, I thought that was fascinating. I'm glad I got to finally share it with you guys. All of our products, everything we've talked about, they're all available on our website, askjoedimatteo.com. That is AskJoedimatteo.com, askjoedimatteo.com. That site is also where you can sign up for our newsletter. You can listen to past episodes of this show. You can find episodes of the classic Ask Joe DiMatteo website, or Ask Joe DiMatteo show. That would be your father's show. If you have any questions, we want to hear about them. Questions at askjoedimatteo.com is the email address. Show notes and articles that we reference will be available on the website. We'll have them try to have them linked on the video, which reminds me, if you're only listening, you're missing out on half the fun. Every episode is available as a video on YouTube, Facebook often, and also on Rumble. We're getting it up on there. Just look for Generation Health. Lots of thanks go out to Josiah Schweinberg, who handles our cameras, Michael Deppish, our editor, Joyce Gibb, our nurse practitioner, who handles private consultation. She got a shout out today. Diane Silverman manages our products. Terry does scheduling. Cecilia does distribution. Joey, Dante, gentlemen, I'm Tyler Andrews, and this has been Generation Health. That is it for us this week. Now it's your turn. What are you going to do with what you've learned? Are you just going to listen passively? Or are you going to take action and become part of this Generation Health? Thanks.